while you're coming up to the front. Matthew, I won't go through it all, it's in your program, but just the short headlines for you, Matthew, that there's a food writer, farmer, television broadcaster, chef. That's pretty good, just to start with, and incredibly busy, and based in southern Tasmania. Beautiful, I envy you greatly. Matthew lives and works on Fat Pig Farm, a mixed holding where he tends a garden, and has presented 6 series of Gourmet Farmer on SPS and 2 documentaries, and you can see a lot more there in your guide, but obviously an amazing background and such an amazing collection of activities and knowledge there. So welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's I'm nerve-wracked. I'm not sure why I'm here. If you saw all the, if you've seen the program, you've seen the initials in front of people's names, like doctor, or the initials after people's names. I feel a little bit like an imposter. And Gabrielle, who's about to come up and speak after me, I sent her an email the other day because we had the same topic to make sure we weren't covering the same things. She said she'd been up at 4:30 a.m. Preparing her talk, and I hadn't. And when I saw Patrice this morning, I was like, "Oh, are you ready?" She said, "I'm just going to iron a shirt," and I haven't. Anyway, we'll give it a crack. I've never done PowerPoint before, so here we go. I want to talk about soil. Like, I've just written a book on soil. It came out a couple of years ago. It's my COVID gift to the world. I had a farm injury and a hospitality tourism business, so I wasn't particularly busy in the ways I could have been. So I was a bit laid up at home. And so I wrote a book on soil. And so I will talk about soil, but there's people who know a lot more about soil here who are going to talk about that in the rest of the conference, but I will sort of touch on it a little bit. So I'm going to talk about why soil matters, I guess. And that's, it only matters if you want to eat, if you want to clothe yourself, if you want to house yourself, if you want to exist, really. It's where we all began and it's where we'll all end up. And so soil matters, and so farming matters, essentially. That's why I'm interested in soil. I'm a farmer in southern Tasmania. We have a little place, and I'll touch on my personal experience. So I want to talk about farming today. So I wanted to show you, this is soil. It's pretty exciting. Not. It was a Canberra journalist who said to me, and I don't know if she's here today. It was a Canberra journalist who said to me, "Oh, soil. Are you trying to make it sexy? Because I think it's as sexy as colon cancer." And I thought that was a little unfair because I don't think colon cancer has anything to recommend it. But it's not very, very sexy. If I showed that picture to anyone who isn't into farming or growing, they'd probably find it pretty boring. Even farmers would go, "Well, why can't I see anything growing in it?" For a start. So when I'm talking soil and trying to make it sexy, I don't have a rainforest to deal with. I don't have the Great Barrier Reef. These are things that give us a visceral pleasure, that make us happy, okay, that give us joy. We don't have to work very hard to like them. But this is soil. Someone's gone to a fair amount of trouble to make a little love heart out of it. But it's not sexy. It's brown. It doesn't smell great. It smells okay. Like some soil smells better than others. It doesn't move. Well, it shouldn't. It's been moving a lot lately. It doesn't talk. It certainly doesn't scream when it's being ruined. So it's pretty hard for us to love soil. And I'm a chef by trade. That was my first job out of school, was a chef. I now grow food in southern Tasmania. I got interested in soil because I'm growing food, not because I cooked food, but I should have understood a lot of things about soil a little bit earlier. So one of the basic things, I know I'm talking to a group of experts, so I might cover some ground that a lot of you are well across. But for me, the one that when I'm talking about soil, if I just say 98% to 99% of all the calories that humans eat on Earth come from the fact we have topsoil, it gets people a little bit interested, a little bit aware. Actually, the 2% of calories that we get that don't come from topsoil, which come from the ocean, a lot of that is sort of high protein content. But a lot of that actually comes from the fact that we have topsoil that is, and the nutrients that are washed off the land masses, because pretty much all of your seafood only occurs close to the continents. My little farm, southern Tasmania, we think of the Malakadee people, the Huon River people. They've been there for 42,000 years. So they've been feeding themselves for 42,000 years. So our little patch of land, 70 acres, a little gully that runs just near the Huon River. When we walk that land and when we farm that land, I used to think, what's for dinner? Or what can I put on the plate tonight from my patch of land? But now we think a long way back and a long way forward. So we think a long way back because 42,000 years, just to put that in context, and these numbers have come up before, we've had agriculture for 10, 12,000 years. You saw pictures of the Fertile Crescent that is fertile no longer. We know that a lot of the ways we grow food is not sustainable. If you want to talk sustainable, 42,000 years where I live by current estimates, 60,000 years or probably longer on mainland Australia, that's kind of the definition of sustainable. Like if you think of Australian topsoil, so Australian topsoil is really an interesting case study. We've lost half the carbon in 200 years, 230 years. Now, carbon essentially is what makes topsoil, not dirt, essentially in broad speaking terms. So if we've lost half the topsoil, that's the magic bit. That does all the growing. We've lost half in the last 200 years. We're going to lose the next half in the next 40 to 50 years if we're not careful. So that's why I'm interested in soil as a farmer. So I think of growing food. It's not rocket science. It really isn't. It's way more complex than that. We're dealing with amazing systems. We've got people with brains the size of a planet who can't predict tomorrow's weather accurately, like with 100% accuracy. And so that's one system that farmers are dealing with. They're just dealing with the weather system, let alone everything else. This is just some numbers, sort of numbers, things that you can find in living topsoil. So when you're growing food, when a farmer is growing food, that's the sort of stuff that's underneath their feet. There's a researcher in America. Lots of these things are invisible. They're too small to see. When we think of soil, we have to use our imaginations. You have to imagine what it's like to have 10 billion living things in a teaspoon of healthy soil from multiple, thousands and thousands of species. But there's a researcher in America, some things are visible, barely visible to the naked eye, things like soil mites. And he's worked out that in a forest in Oregon, every footfall that you take in a forest in Oregon, you're treading on 16,000 little critters, not bacteria, not single-celled organisms, not microscopic organisms, not fungi, 16,000 organisms, like soil mites and things like that, that are supported on 120,000 legs. Soil is a living, breathing superorganism under our feet. And when I say breathing, like someone today said they saw me give a talk at a garlic festival recently, and I didn't talk about soil compaction, the fact that soil is compacted and it doesn't have enough air in. Soil is supposed to be, we saw a slide before, 50% air, up to 50% air. Proper, healthy soil, all the gases are exchanged in the top layer of soil every hour, in the top 20, 30 centimetres. That's healthy living soil. It's a living, breathing superorganism. I'm working with a soil scientist at the moment trying to do some demo plots on our little farm. And she said one of her lecturers describes soil as, think of it as a single organism. Don't think of it as all these things. Think of it as a single organism. So when you're thinking of your soil, would you cut it open? Like, would you cut open your cow? That's an organism. Would you cut it open for no good reason? No, you wouldn't. Okay. Would you shave all its hair off? No, you wouldn't. Would you cut off its food supply? No, you wouldn't. And so I thought it was a really nice way to think of soil. So I think of soil farming is this miracle that it involves you're creating food from dirt, soil, whatever, air, sunlight, and water. You're actually creating something tangible, something physical, something meaningful, maybe even something delicious and nutritious from essentially what seems like nothing. When you eat a carrot, that carrot, the vast majority of that carrot used to be air and water, right? So a little bit of, I was saying to someone before, this audience probably doesn't need it, but there was talk about the plants' leaves as solar panels, and the amount of sunlight that falls on the earth, every hour is the same amount of energy that humans use in a year. Like there is so much energy in the sun, and that's where all energy on earth comes from. But when I was at school, I've been farming for 13 years. It's only 5 years ago I understood photosynthesis. I used to think like whatever my year 9 teacher was at Holder High in Western Creek for the locals in Canberra where I grew up. He told me photosynthesis is when a plant using sun's energy breathes in carbon dioxide and breathes out oxygen. We breathe in oxygen and out carbon dioxide. Plants help us breathe. It's this beautiful thing, right? That's the most boring thing that plants do, because actually most of the air we breathe comes from the ocean. What plants do is this utter miracle. We talked about it before. Every little cell on the plant is a solar panel trapping the sun's energy. And what they do is that, yes, they take carbon dioxide out of the air, and they take that carbon dioxide and water, split them apart, recombine it as carbohydrate. A plant creates sugar out of thin air. They make their own food, right? This is utterly amazing. And I didn't know that as a grower as a commercial grower of food for 7 years. I didn't know that until, I was in my late 40s. And yet this seemingly basic piece of knowledge that all energy on Earth comes from the sun, and energy in digestible form is what plants create. They create energy in digestible form, is another miracle. And so farming is about that harnessing that energy. Oh, and just to put some numbers on it, when a plant takes in that energy, it feeds 30% of it to these things. So a third, sometimes up to 80% of the sugars a plant creates that it makes out of thin air, it feeds to the underground ecosystem, because it needs the underground ecosystem to get things it needs. Because a plant can create protein, fat and carbohydrate pretty much out of gases in the air and water, but it can't get all the other things, just obvious things like calcium or iron or manganese or phosphorus. It has to get them from soil, from the rock minerals locked in soil, things that aren't airborne, that exist under your feet. I've been playing this game a little bit, Menindee or Mars. Right, is that Menindee or Mars? That first one was Menindee. That one, Menindee or Mars? Mars. Menindee or Mars? Mars. What about that one? Yeah, there's a tiny bit of grass. You might be able to see it on that in that one. I play this game a bit. It seems harsh on the farmers around Menindee, but I remember in the drought 2 years ago, I'm on this thing called Twitter. I'm not very good at it, but I noticed a whole bunch of farmers posting pictures of their farm because a Mars rover had been and taken some really high quality photos of Mars and like this. And the farmers were saying, "Hey, look at my place. It looks like Mars." And they were proud of it. Rightio, dust storms. So I was talking about how soil isn't mobile. Well, it is a bit. This ABC story, dust storm settles. All rangers need to remember that the next drought is inevitable, right? That's a really bad way to look at farming. Australia loses. You would have seen a whole bunch of the plumes. You would have seen the colour of Sydney Harbour. You would have seen all that terrible mud and the aerial shots of all those people devastated by the floods recently. You can look at it as mud. You can look at it as dust that blows away, or you can look at it as topsoil. Australia loses on average 2.9 billion tonnes of topsoil every year. So if you put that into railway carts, this is I think that's an iron ore train. But if you had that same sort of train, had all the topsoil we lose every year, on average, varies, on average every year, that train would stretch around the globe 15 times, right? That's how much topsoil we lose, right? So we're losing topsoil globally 30 to 40 times faster than it's made. If we plough soil, we lose 100 times faster than nature can make it. So topsoil is something that can be made. Nature makes it for 420 billion years. I think Walter was saying we've been growing topsoil, pedogenesis, the building of topsoil. We've made topsoil more than we've lost generally on average, but not lately. We're losing it 30 to 40 times faster than it's being made. And as I said before, there's a lot of people with initials in front of them, behind their names, a lot of highly qualified people. Their brains are way bigger than mine, but I can do some basic maths. That isn't sustainable. Rightio, how much topsoil do we lose? 2.9 billion tonnes, a bit hard to imagine. Okay, every breakfast, every lunch, every dinner that humans eat on Earth, we lose 9 kilograms of topsoil. Right. I looked a whole bunch of estimates up. If you want to be really, really, really cautious, we lose 2 to 3 kilograms of topsoil for every breakfast, for every lunch, for every dinner that humans on Earth eat. All right, that's the lowest estimate. Okay, more likely something like about 9 kilos. What we're dealing with here is the magic bit, as I said before. So do we want the whole world to look a bit like that? So 40%, again, this has come up before. It's hard being fifth speaker. 40% of the world's agricultural land has been abandoned because it's no longer fertile, okay? Because we've either washed it away, blown it away, it's become desertified, it's become biologically poorer and is no longer suitable for growing food. So what's a proper farmer? I was sitting next to someone the other day. She said, "You and I aren't proper farmers." We were at some farmer gathering. And I thought, well, she isn't. No, she is. Okay, 70% of the world's food is grown by smallholders, right? So we think of farming as big, broad acre. We live in a country that's arid or relatively low rainfall. It's hot. We're a long way from the equator compared to a lot of Europe. Like my little farm, southern Tasmania, is the same distance from the equator as Florence in Tuscany. So just if you get your head around that, that's the sort of sunlight that we're exposed to on the mainland Australia. So we think of it as big. It's not. 70% of the world's food is grown by smallholders, a lot of that by women. And again, Walter was referring to a lot of those people in India, those people who've got a tiny little space that they're growing food for. 1 billion people around the tropics feed themselves. Pretty much their entire diet comes from domestic gardens. 1 billion, that's 1 in 8. So what's a proper farmer? How do we look at farming? Do we look at it as broadacre? Do we look at it as small? Am I a proper farmer? I've got 70 acres. This person saying, we're not proper farmers. I thought it was a little bit crazy. Well, one of the things I'm a numbers person. I can't do the calculations on, sustainability at 30 to 40 times faster losing topsoil than gaining it. But I love these sort of numbers. It's estimated it takes 10 calories of fossil fuels to get 1 calorie of food, right? So everything you eat is subsidised by fossil fuels. Everything, every single thing you eat. So I saw something yesterday about how prices for food are going to go up because fuel's going up. That's because you're not really eating food; you're eating fuel. We're living on carbon. We're burning carbon that was stored 200 million years ago to create the food that we eat today. Again, that's not sustainable. Even if you ignore the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the mere maths of that show that it's not. It's not possible. And we know that if we release all the carbon, that's locked up in coal and oil and gas, when those things were locked away, we had multiple times more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we had today. And life like we know it wasn't possible. It just wasn't possible. I think you had some dragonflies with meter wingspans, but you didn't have mammals and people like us. Right. This is my personal journey. Got to talk a little bit about farming today. That's me. That's a pig shelter. So we bought a piece of land, 22 acres, 5 of it was useful, 17 wasn't. I fenced in another 5 acres of bush to do a little bit of grazing. This is part of the 5 acres that's useful. So I'm no saint. I know Charlie showed some photos of his place earlier. We did here what a lot of farmers do. A lot of that talk about we're losing topsoil. I don't think we should blame farmers, but I think lots of farmers are doing really great things and they're moving in the right direction, but we can all do better. And I certainly can always do better. This is a few years ago, we had this farm. I put my pigs down there and it rained. There's now a dam there, not surprisingly. But we did what lots of farmers do, grew some food, got a lot out of the land, sold it, moved on. Okay, not proud of it. We bought a new farm, a 70-acre farm that we've now had for 10 years. This just shows, I hope you can see that, the change over our management over the years. In the first photo, April 2016, a bit of bare ground, not much green cover. It's still mostly ground cover, but you can see some bare earth in the background to the left of the shed. And in April 2021, so 5 years later, most of the bare earth is gone, much better green cover. It was a slightly wetter year, so hence the colour change, but more looking at vegetative growth. And then I took a photo recently, but it doesn't sort of line up quite as well. And this is more recently. So you can sort of see the changes over time. And what I like about this is it shows we can build topsoil. So every time you see green living things, that's an indication of topsoil. So we can't know what's happening in topsoil, but we can get an indication by everything that happens above ground. So when I see all those green living plants, when I see no bare earth, I know that my soil is being fed. This is our garden in 10 years. A bit easier in a garden, but I think if you want to see if humans can grow topsoil, look in a garden, look in your own garden. Every house was built on a piece of land that they went out of their way to ruin, to compact, to scrape the topsoil away, and then you can build yourself a garden. So we grow a few things. We want to grow more of these. Worms, one of the great ecosystem engineers, and that's our garden today. That's my pig paddocks. We've changed our management over the years. As I say, we're no saints. We make a lot of mistakes, but gradually we're changing things around and things are improving. And this is regenerative agriculture happening. Like, I'm a total Gumby. I trained as a chef in Canberra, right? I used to push trolleys at Woolworths in Coolman Court, right? That's my background. I don't have any farming background, but if I can do that, surely we can regenerate Australia. We now do things like growing, go out of our way to actually feed the soil as well as feed the animals. What's a proper farm? Well, on 70 acres, we produce enough food for 5,000 feast meals a year. There's one going on today. People get about 26 different plant products to eat, 2 animal proteins. It goes for about 2 hours. It's quite a large meal. We employ 10 full-time staff. We have the way we manage it is we don't burn fossil fuels. We don't have any machinery. We do have a brush cutter, but that broke. We have a scythe and a sickle. Anyway, the choice is ours. We can regenerate. We can do better. I think I am always trying to do better, but I would hope that the people who are growing food would say, don't take the blame. Don't feel guilty about what might have happened in the past that your ancestors or whatever did, but what can you do better? So the choice is ours, Mars or Earth.
Perfect timing, both of the speakers. So thank you for that. All right, Matthew, excellent presentation. And again, big picture right down to a personal story.
I'm sorry I didn't on my shirt.
I don't know if I did. Questions, please, for Matthew.
Oh, none. Gosh, that's good.
Hop by the microphone, if you don't mind. And yes, straight in front of me. Hello. Oh, he's had 2 questions already. If there's someone who has, yes, please.
Sorry. Is it on?
I'll follow the boss, Jenny.
It's a comment about the soil. We can't regrow soil fast at all, I think. We can recover the soil carbon fast, but the basic soil, which is the mineral matter, weathering of rocks takes eons. So we can recover the carbon, but not the actual soil itself, the basis for it.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting thing. So essentially soil is 95% crushed up rock in terms of the dry mass, not counting water or air when you measure soil. And so 95% is crushed up rock. So sand, silt and clay forms of crushed up rock. Yeah, it's interesting. We washed a lot away and blown a lot away. We deplete, I guess, some of the minerals in some of them. So Australia in particular sort of leached out a lot of the some of the things we might want in the topsoil. But there's still a fair amount of that crushed up rock left. If you go to southwest Tassie, you'll see peat straight onto bedrock. Not much grows there, but we're not on bedrock in enormous amounts. We've generally got a little bit of something that's crushed up that will hold up plants that you can add a biological component to create topsoil, I think.
Thank you. And next question.
Thank you. Great talk, Matthew. Thank you. It's your knowledge on photosynthesis. If I was to suggest that we can solve our economic problems just by printing more money, I'd be regarded as economically illiterate. Well, we could do that. We're a sovereign nation. We can just print more money, but there's problems with it. So how do we solve this problem of ecological illiteracy? It's not just this knowledge about photosynthesis. It's a very big problem across all of our community. We just don't, our community doesn't understand how so much of this works.
Yeah, I think storytelling. I mean, I would say that because I'm a storyteller. But when I looked at the problem with soil and people going, it's the sexiest colon cancer, you have to make it interesting. And no offense to soil scientists, but you should see how boring all those papers are, research papers on soil science, to the average person. And then oftentimes it's not translated in a way that gives the person a reason to care. If you say half the antibiotics have their genesis in soil, people go, oh my God. And there's researchers at the University of Queensland, you can mail your soil to them today. They're looking for the next generation of antibiotics in soil. We know they're there. 98% of what lives in soil is unidentified or hasn't been described by science, but we know the next generation of antibiotics there. You have to give people a reason to care. And I think a lot of that has to be how we frame it, how we tell the story. We can tell really boring stories about farming or really great ones about farming. We can tell really boring stories about population and sustainability, or we can tell great stories. And so the more people who are telling the story in a way that engages at least one other human being is I guess, my view, the best way.
I think we'll have to leave it there so we've got enough time for our third speaker. So thank you very much for that.